The day my father walked into my restaurant and demanded 25% of my business was the first time my family had spoken to me in 5 years. 5 years of silence. 5 years of pretending I didn't exist. And suddenly there he was, standing in the middle of the dining room like he owned the place. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who are supposed to love you the most, make sure you subscribe. Because this story still gives me chills when I tell it. 5 years earlier, I was the daughter everyone in my family depended on. My name is Emily, and growing up I was the responsible one. The fixer. The girl who stayed late helping my mom cook Thanksgiving dinner while my older brother Jason watched football, and my younger sister Lily scrolled through her phone. I didn't mind. I actually loved my family. My dad used to say I had the work ethic of 3 people. I carried that compliment around like a trophy. I worked 2 jobs in college, paid most of my own tuition. And when I graduated with a culinary degree, my dream was simple. I wanted to open a small restaurant. Not some fancy Michelin star place. Just something warm. Something real. The kind of place where people felt like family the moment they walked in. Back then I thought my real family would be proud. And for a while they were. I remember sitting around my parents' dining table one Sunday afternoon. I had my laptop open, spreadsheets everywhere, explaining my plan. A small neighborhood bistro. Homemade food. Cozy atmosphere. My mom smiled politely. Jason laughed and said, "Restaurants fail all the time, Em." But my dad leaned forward, tapping the table. "How much do you need to start?" My heart practically exploded. I told him the truth. I'd saved a lot already, but I was still short. About $50,000. There was a long silence. Then my dad said something that changed everything. Family invests in family. Those 4 words felt like a warm blanket wrapped around my shoulders. He offered to help. Not as a loan, he said. As an investment. My parents would put money into the restaurant, and in return they'd own a small share. At the time it sounded fair. Honestly, it sounded like love. We spent weeks planning together. My mom helped design the menu. Jason claimed he could handle the marketing. My sister even helped pick the paint colors for the walls. For the first time in my life, I felt like we were building something together. Looking back now, I realized something. They weren't building my dream. They were positioning themselves inside it. But I didn't see that yet. I just saw my family cheering for me. Or at least, I thought they were. The night everything started to crack was the night my dad asked me to sign a new document. I remember the exact moment. We were sitting in their living room. Papers spread across the coffee table. Legal stuff I barely understood. Dad slid one page toward me. "Just a formality," he said. I glanced at it. Then I froze. Because the ownership percentage wasn't small anymore. It wasn't the 10% we'd talked about. It said 40%. I laughed nervously, thinking it had to be a mistake. "Dad, this says 40. He didn't laugh. He just leaned back in his chair and said something that made my stomach drop. "Well, you wouldn't have a restaurant without us." And suddenly the room felt very, very quiet. That was the first moment I realized something was wrong. But I had no idea yet that my entire family was about to erase me from their lives. And that 5 years later, they would walk straight into the restaurant I built without them. I remember staring at that paper for what felt like forever. 40%. It didn't make sense. That wasn't the deal. The whole reason I agreed to take their investment in the first place was because it was supposed to be small, supportive, family helping family, not ownership. "Dad," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm, "we agreed on 10%. My mom suddenly became very interested in her coffee mug. Jason crossed his arms like he'd been waiting for this moment. And my dad just shrugged. "Well, things change." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Because in that moment, something inside me started to feel off. Like I had walked into a conversation that had already been decided without me. I looked around the room. "Wait, did you guys already talk about this?" No one answered. That silence told me everything. Jason finally leaned forward, smirking like he was explaining something obvious to a child. "Emily, you're the chef. You're not a business person. Dad and I will handle the real side of things." The real side. My stomach dropped. "This is my restaurant," I said. Jason laughed. "Not without our money, it isn't." That was the moment the betrayal fully revealed itself. Not just from my dad. From all of them. My sister Lily finally spoke up from the couch, barely looking at me. Honestly, you should be grateful they're helping at all. Grateful. I had worked 2 jobs for years to build this dream. I had saved every spare dollar. And now somehow I was supposed to feel lucky that my own family was taking almost half of it. I pushed the paper back across the table. I'm not signing this. The temperature in the room changed instantly. My dad's jaw tightened. Jason's smile disappeared. And my mom finally looked up. Emily, she said softly, like she was talking to a stubborn child. Don't make this difficult. Difficult. I remember this strange buzzing in my ears. Difficult. I said. You're trying to take 40% of my restaurant. My dad leaned forward slowly. You're being emotional. And something about that sentence, something about the way he said it, just snapped something inside me. I'm being emotional? I repeated. Jason rolled his eyes. This is why women shouldn't run businesses. That sentence landed like a punch to the chest. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly across the floor. I built this, I said, my voice shaking. I did the work. I created the menu. I found the location. I saved the money. And now you're trying to push me out of my own dream. My dad stood up too. You're not being pushed out, he said coldly. You're being protected from yourself. Protected. I laughed. But it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind that comes right before you cry. So the plan is what? I asked. You and Jason own the restaurant and I just cook in the kitchen? Jason smirked again. Now you're getting it. I felt like the floor had disappeared under my feet, because suddenly the past few months started making sense. Jason handling marketing. Dad insisting on certain legal paperwork. Mom encouraging me to trust them. It had never been about helping me. It had been about control. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. My mom's voice followed me. If you walk out, don't expect us to keep supporting this fantasy. I turned around slowly. You mean my restaurant? My dad didn't hesitate. If you don't sign the agreement, there is no investment. And then Jason said the sentence that destroyed everything. Good luck opening anything without us. I walked out that night shaking. Half angry. Half heartbroken. I kept waiting for one of them to call me. For someone to say, hey, this got out of hand. But the phone never rang. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the next week. Eventually I realized the truth. My family had made their decision. If I wouldn't give them control of my dream, then I wasn't family anymore. 5 years. That's how long the silence lasted. 5 birthdays where my phone never rang. 5 Christmas mornings without a single text. 5 years of being erased like I had never existed. Broke me at first. I cried more in those first 6 months than I had in my entire life. But heartbreak does something strange to you. Eventually, stops hurting. And it starts turning into something else. Determination. Because one night, sitting alone in my tiny apartment, staring at my old restaurant plans, I realized something that changed everything. They were wrong about one thing. I didn't need them. Not their money. Not their approval. Not their permission. If they thought I couldn't build my dream without them, then I was about to prove them very, very wrong. And 5 years later, the doors of my restaurant would open, without a single dollar from my family. But what I didn't expect was that the first time they'd walk through those doors again would be the day my father demanded a piece of something he tried to destroy. 5 years is a long time to build something, especially when you're doing it alone. The first year after I cut ties with my family was brutal. I sold my car. I moved into a tiny apartment that barely had enough room for a bed and a folding table. I worked double shifts in 2 different restaurants just to save every dollar I could. Some nights I'd come home smelling like grease and onions, collapse onto the mattress, and stare at the ceiling wondering if Jason was right. Maybe I wasn't a business person. Maybe I was just a chef with a dream too big for her own life. But then something strange would happen. I'd wake up the next morning, and I'd get up anyway. Because every shift meant more savings. Every dollar meant I was one step closer to proving something. Not to them. To myself. By the 3rd year I had enough to start small. A little place on a quiet corner street. Nothing fancy. Just warm lights, wooden tables, and the kind of food that made people close their eyes after the first bite. The first night we opened, I stood in the kitchen doorway watching strangers laugh at my tables. And I cried. Not the broken kind of crying I did 5 years earlier. This was different. This was pride. Word spread faster than I expected. People loved the place. They loved that everything was homemade. They loved that I came out to the dining room sometimes and talked with guests like they were old friends. Within 2 years, the restaurant was packed almost every night. We had lines on weekends. Food bloggers started writing about us. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving. I was thriving. Which brings me to the afternoon everything came full circle. It was a busy Saturday lunch rush when the hostess came into the kitchen looking nervous. "Emily," she said quietly, "there's a family here asking for you." I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped out into the dining room. And the second I saw them, my heart stopped. My father, my mother, Jason, and Lily, sitting at one of my tables like they belonged there. 5 years of silence, and suddenly they were eating my food. For a moment none of us spoke. My dad looked around the restaurant slowly, like he was inspecting property. "Nice place," he finally said. "Not I'm proud of you. Not we missed you. Just nice place." Jason leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Yeah," he said. "Looks like you did all right." The air between us felt heavy. I crossed my arms. "What are you doing here?" My mom gave me that same soft smile she used years ago when she wanted something. "We wanted to reconnect, honey. Reconnect." After 5 years. My dad cleared his throat. "Well, and talk business." Of course. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What business?" He leaned forward like we were partners in a meeting. "You built this with family roots," he said. "And we did originally offer to invest." My stomach turned. "So we think it's fair," he continued calmly, "that the family gets 25%. 25%. Just like that. Like the last 5 years didn't happen. Like they hadn't erased me from their lives the moment I refused to give up control. The old version of me would have cried. The girl sitting at their table 5 years ago would have tried to argue. But I wasn't her anymore. I smiled. Jason noticed first. "What's funny?" he asked. I reached into the folder I had been carrying. Because running a restaurant teaches you something important. You document everything. I placed a paper on the table. Jason picked it up. His smile disappeared instantly. It was a printed screenshot. A social media post. 5 years old. Jason had written it himself. "Some people think they can run a business. Good luck opening anything without us." Below it were dozens of comments from friends and family agreeing. Calling my dream a fantasy. Calling me naive. I looked at my father. "You remember this?" No one spoke. Then I placed a second document on the table. Legal paperwork. My restaurant's ownership records. 100% Emily Carter. No investors. No partners. No family shares. Just me. "I built this without you," I said quietly. My dad's jaw tightened. "Well," he said stiffly, "family still deserves something." That's when I leaned a little closer across the table and said the most satisfying words I've ever spoken in my life. "You're right." Jason blinked. "Wait, what?" I smiled again. "You deserve exactly what you gave me for 5 years. My dad frowned. "What does that mean?" I straightened up and gestured toward the door. "Nothing." The silence that followed felt incredible. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just final. After a moment I nodded politely. "Now if you'll excuse me," I said. "I have real customers to take care of." They left 10 minutes later. No yelling. No apology. Just the quiet realization that they had no power here. And as I watched them walk out of my restaurant, I didn't feel revenge. I felt peace. Because sometimes justice isn't about hurting the people who betrayed you. Sometimes it's about building something so strong. Their absence doesn't matter anymore. 5 years ago my family erased me from their lives. But today, they walked into a place where I had already learned how to live without them. And that was the real victory. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't fighting back. It's rising so high the people who doubted you can only watch from the ground.